Heavy Metal was an American comic magazine that ran from 1977 until 2023. It started off as a licensed translation of a French comic series, and eventually it went on to produce its own science fiction, fantasy, erotica, steampunk stories. And in 1991, some of those stories were turned into a science fiction, fantasy, erotica, steampunk movie. Science fiction, fantasy, erotica, steampunk, that's a mouthful. But those words aren't the only thing in this movie that are worth putting in your mouth. Welcome to Exploitation Reviews, and me, Rob, and today I'm taking a look at Heavy Metal from 1981. It seems unthinkable today that a well-known producer like Ivan Reitman would team up with some well-known actors like John Candy and Harold Ramis and make an animated fantasy film aimed at adults, with all of the cartoon nudity that implies. But that's exactly what happened. And it was a moderate hit at the box office, but more importantly for us, it went on to be a cult classic. Let's check it out. We open with a voice telling us a shadow will fall over the universe and death will fall from the sky. And then the credits. John Candy, Eugene Levy, Harold Ramis. This movie might be too classy for this channel. Nope, never mind. There's John Vernon. We're good.
I think he's got a point.
And then the shuttle drops off a car, and that looks pretty cool. So cool, in fact, that 30-some-odd years later, it will be recreated in real life by a garbage man. Wait, no, I said that wrong. I meant garbage man. Space is important. Anywho, that spaceman lands and his daughter asks what he brought her. He brought her his own death. Happy birthday, baby! This green ball of death says that it's the sum of all evil, and it starts telling her stories about how people all across the universe seek it out. Telling stories to people who really aren't interested in hearing them? Man, this thing really is evil. Way more evil than my neighbor who's always trying to tell me about his problems. I don't care, Helmut. I really don't. Anyway, every anthology movie needs a framing device, and this is this movie's framing device. A green ball telling stories. Our first story, which is based on a story by Dan O'Bannon, that's the writer of Alien and writer-director of Return of the Living Dead, by the way. It takes place in a futuristic New York and follows a cab driver who is kind of a Bukowski kind of character, and he is prepared to deal with New York cab fares. A woman runs away from some unsavory types and into Harry's cab. She's in trouble, so he takes her to the police station, but the cops of the future, much like their present counterparts, are useless, so now she's his problem.
Can I sleep with you?
Which maybe isn't such a bad thing. Anyway, the woman knows the location of that green orb, and many people want her to tell them where it is. And Harry is in the thick of it, which refers both to the situation and the woman's animated pubic hair. Our next story starts with a boy, voiced by the one and only John Candy. He finds the green orb and it transports him into a different world. It also makes him a man.
I can make you a man!
Yeah, kind of like that. A religious group who always have their boobies out throw a woman with even bigger boobies into a red pool, and John Candy jumps in and saves her. She is so thankful that she offers him anything he wants, but she doesn't have anything, so guess what he wants? Yes, this is pure teen boy fantasy material, and no, I don't mean that as a criticism. In fact, I'm not even sure why people often disparage content aimed at teen boys. Why shouldn't teen boys have content aimed at them? There's lots of garbage content aimed at teen girls.
Oh my god!
Anywho, the woman is captured, again, and John Candy is tasked with finding the green orb so he can trade it for the woman. So, what do you think? Will he save her? Well, like I said, this is pure teen boy fantasy material, so no matter what happens, we can be sure to see a lot more cartoon boobies. The next story takes place in a space station. A captain is standing trial for murder and a host of other unpleasantries. Unfortunately for him, his star witness found the orb on the way to the trial, and well, his testimony really doesn't help.
In all the time I've known him, he's never done anything immoral.
See? Unless maybe the preschooler's prostitute ring.
From space station to World War II bomber. Our next story has a really cool art style. The green orb has taken an interest in the plane and turns the recently killed crew into zombies. pretty cool. Looks a lot like those old EC comics. In the next sequence, a secretary with some really nice taste in jewelry is abducted by aliens. This is one of the more comedic sequences and features some stoner humor. Not exactly my thing, but it might be your thing. Either way, the sex bot here is a nice touch. The final sequence is probably the most famous. In fact, when South Park did their heavy metal parody years and years and years ago, this is the sequence they drew most inspiration from. It features a beautiful mute warrior woman, Tarna, and an evil warlord. And they're gonna fight. Of course, like every anthology movie, after this final sequence is over, it'll wrap back up with the framing sequence, and that's enough out of me as far as plot goes. Let's talk some highlights. Okay, well, this film obviously isn't for everyone. But if you like psychedelic artwork and music like Black Sabbath, Devo, and the Blue Oyster Cult, this might be for you. And if you like bloody cartoon violence and you don't mind, or even like, heaps of cartoon boobies, this movie is definitely for you. And I like all of those things, and I wish cinema had a lot more of all of those things, so this movie is for me. I don't think that every sequence is great. That's often the case with anthology films, but there are things to appreciate in each of the sequences. I like the characters in the cab sequence, the teen boy fantasy sequence has a lot of nudity, the Captain on Trial sequence has some shocking and shockingly funny dialogue. I love the artwork in the World War II bomber sequence. The stoner alien sequence, like I said, isn't exactly my bag, but it does have some funny moments. And the final sequence has a badass warrior woman, and also a fair bit of nudity. So if your interests are broad enough, there's not really a skippable sequence in the bunch. Even if they aren't all exactly to your taste, there'll probably be at least one that is. But beyond all that, I wouldn't say the film is perfect. Like a teen boy turned into a man and placed on a planet where clothing is optional, this film has some shortcomings. Well, I don't really have a whole lot to complain about here. I think the best anthology films do a good job of tying the framing story into the rest of the stories, like in Tales of the Hood, for example. And this movie doesn't really do that very well. It's little more than the orb telling stories, and for no real reason. So that's a little disappointing. And the very best anthology movies, like Trick or Treat, for example, tie all of the stories together, and this movie certainly doesn't do that very well either. It does do it to a certain extent, but not very well. But whatever, the comics it's based on don't do that either, so I don't know what I was expecting. Overall, if you're looking for an animated feature aimed at adults, or teenage boys, you could do a lot worse than this one. Cool animation, cool music, and some really, really big boobs.